It was a chilly November evening when I first set foot in the Everwood Library. I had just moved to the quiet, secluded town, drawn by its old-world charm and peaceful atmosphere. The library, nestled between towering oaks, was an impressive structure: Gothic arches, stone walls, and a creaky, time-worn door that opened with a slow groan. A place that seemed to exist outside of time, as if it had been here for centuries. I had always loved the scent of old books, the silence that enveloped you the moment you walked into a library. But there was something different about this one, an uneasy stillness that seemed to linger, as if the air itself held secrets. The shelves were lined with dusty volumes, their spines faded and covered in a layer of history. I was in town to research my family's ancestry, and the library had a small, yet impressive collection of local records. As the librarian showed me to the genealogy section, she paused for a moment and glanced over her shoulder, as if something had caught her attention. "Are you sure you'll be all right?" she asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Most people don't stay here after dark." I chuckled, dismissing her warning. "I'm just here to do some research. I'll be fine." She gave me a tight-lipped smile and left me alone in the dusty rows of books. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the library's old wooden floors. The only sound was the rustle of pages as I flipped through old records, searching for any mention of my great-great-grandfather. As the minutes ticked by, I began to feel the eerie stillness settle in. There were no other visitors, no sounds except the occasional creak of the building itself. But then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed something odd. A movement. A shadow flickered just beyond the shelves, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. I froze, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. The library, which had seemed so peaceful at first, now felt heavy, oppressive. I shrugged it off. The building was old, surely it was just the wind or my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I continued my research, the feeling of being watched only intensified. The temperature seemed to drop, and I pulled my jacket tighter around myself. It was almost as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, echoing in the quiet library. My breath caught in my throat. I spun around, expecting to see someone, maybe the librarian returning. But the aisle was empty. The footsteps stopped as soon as I looked. Panic started to settle in, and I stood frozen in place, my heart racing. I glanced toward the clock on the wall. It was almost 8 p.m. The library had to be closing soon. I was just about to gather my things and leave when I heard it again. This time, much closer. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. I could hear them coming from the far corner of the library, where the old archives were kept. With my curiosity piqued, I reluctantly made my way toward the sound. The air grew colder as I moved, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. When I reached the archive room, I found the door slightly ajar, a faint light flickering from within. I pushed it open, the creaking sound echoing in the silence. Inside, the light was dim, just a single candle sitting on a small desk in the center of the room. But it wasn't the candle that made my heart stop. It was the figure standing by the desk. A man, tall and thin, his face obscured by a long, dark coat. His back was to me, and he stood motionless, as if waiting for something. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling. The figure didn't move. I stepped closer, a mix of curiosity and fear gnawing at me. Just as I was about to reach out and tap him on the shoulder, the figure turned. His face was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes, they were dark and hollow, as if something was missing from them. His lips parted into a slow, eerie smile. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, his voice echoing in my mind, not my ears. It sent a chill through my entire body. Before I could react, the candle flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I froze, panic flooding through me. The temperature dropped even further, and I could see my breath in front of me. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping me inside. My pulse raced as I pounded on the door, shouting for help, but my voice seemed to dissolve into the air. The silence was unbearable. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest, but there was no one there. I backed away, my eyes scanning the room desperately. The shadows seemed to stretch and warp around me, and then I heard it again, the sound of footsteps. Only this time they weren't alone. The room was filled with whispering voices, faint and indistinct, growing louder as if closing in on me. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't alone. I could feel it. Something or someone was watching me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the figure again. He was closer now, his face no longer obscured by shadows. His pale skin seemed to glow in the dim light, and his eyes, those empty, hollow eyes, stared directly at me. "You've awakened them," he whispered, his voice cold and raspy. "You shouldn't have come." I screamed, pounding on the door again, but nothing happened. The shadows swirled around me as if they were alive, closing in tighter with every passing second. The whispers grew louder, now indistinguishable, like a chorus of voices calling my name. I felt something cold brush against my skin, and I spun around to see the figure standing inches from me, his breath freezing the air around us. Then, just as suddenly as it had all started, the room went silent. The figure disappeared, the shadows melted away, and the temperature returned to normal. The door opened with a creak, revealing the librarian standing there, her eyes wide with fear. "You've seen them, haven't you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, too scared to speak. I didn't know what had just happened, but I had no intention of staying to find out. As I left Everwood Library that night, I glanced back at the towering stone building. The lights in the windows flickered, and for just a brief moment, I swore I saw the silhouette of a man standing behind them, watching me. The library, once a place of knowledge and peace, had become a place of something much darker, something I was never meant to understand. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the library wasn't finished with me yet.